Hello everybody, this is going to be a part 2 to Prove Your Faith, the response that I'm posting right now. It's almost, I got like a minute left and it'll be posted. I'm not completely satisfied with how it ended because there's a lot more that can be gone into in Romans 10:13 and where I left it. So I'm going to basically do a quick ending to that basically here, and that's what this is going to be. So we're going to look at Romans 10. So I ended the last video with this, Romans 10:13. For everyone who calls the name of the Lord shall be saved. Now this is a quote that Paul uses from Joel 2:32, and in Joel 2:32, the word Lord there is referring to Yahweh. That's what it means there. And Paul is using it in Romans 10:13 to mean Jesus. So Paul here clearly thinks that Jesus is Yahweh. But let's look even further into that. Just before that, in Romans 10:9, Paul says, if you confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. So Paul here gives two criteria to be saved. One, believe that Jesus was raised from the dead. And two, the first one he actually gives, is that Jesus is Lord. You have to confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. Well, what does he mean by that? Well, if you continue on into 10:13, obviously what he means by that is if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Yahweh or God, then you shall be saved. But, of course, Prove Your Faith here would want to say, no, that's not what he's saying. What he means there by Lord is that Lord can be used to mean a title of deity, sure, but it can also be used to be a title of authority, that somebody has authority. Well, okay, so if Jesus is Lord, is just Jesus having authority, then I confess with my mouth, Jesus has authority, that gets me saved. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't, not at all. David, for example, can be called Lord in the Old Testament. Does that get me saved if I say David is Lord? No, it doesn't. If I say Moses is Lord, does that get me saved? No, it doesn't. It seems here that Jesus' lordship, what we are to mean by Lord there, is a lot more than just authority. And Paul seems to think so because he continues down into Romans 10:13 where he tells us what is meant by Lord there, and what is meant by Lord there is Yahweh. So Paul flat out tells us in order to be saved we must confess with our mouths that Jesus is Yahweh, Jesus is God. Prove Your Faith obviously hasn't done that. Prove Your Faith, well, I guess you can figure it out on your own. So I'm going to read to you a quote from a book. The book is called Passionate Conviction, Contemporary Discourses on Christian Apologetics. It's an essay that I'm reading from called Revisionist View About Jesus by Charles L. Quarles, and page 102. And he says it way better than I could, so I'm just going to go ahead and just read this to you. This proof text in Romans 10:13 closely matches the statement in 10:9. Whoever calls matches confess with your mouth. Name of the Lord matches Jesus as Lord, and will be saved obviously matches will be saved. Paul quoted Joel 2:32 to explain and confirm his parallel statement in Romans 10:9. And Paul's Greek translation of Joel 2:32, the name Lord is Kairos. But in the original Hebrew text, the name is Yahweh or Jehovah. By using a text in which Lord means Yahweh to explain what it means to confess Jesus as Lord, Paul clearly demonstrates that a sinner must confess Jesus to be Yahweh, God Almighty, in order to be saved. So in the New Testament, where it says Jesus is Lord, what is meant by that is Jesus is Yah. So the big floating question in here is, if God has a proper name, and that proper name is Yah, can God manifest in the flesh and take on another name? Why couldn't he? If we recognize that he still has his proper name, because his proper name doesn't change, God will forever and ever, as he says so in the Old Testament, have his proper name. Can he have other names? Why couldn't he? I do. Lots of people do. People have nicknames. This whole argument is completely ridiculous that just because God's proper name is Yah doesn't mean Jesus can't be God, because Paul himself tells us Jesus is Yah.